International news now.
Well, now we're going to move on to our second topic, and that is the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or the DACA program. And this is a very emotional issue for a lot of people, all of us really, and it is something that affects Texas in particular. I think it affects Austin and the University of Texas, and so we acknowledge that this is an important issue that affects a lot of people's very directly, perhaps here at the university. We're going to talk about the politics of this question, but it doesn't escape us that there's other important moral issues and personal issues involved in this. And so we're going to go ahead. Pat's going to introduce our thing.
As you know, this program was enacted in 2012 by President Obama through an executive order. It temporarily protects some undocumented immigrants from deportation if they were brought to the United States as a child or under the age of 16. And so we're going to begin with a video clip from Vox again that provides a brief history of the DACA program and its demise over the last 2 weeks.
Effective immediately, the Department of Homeland Security is taking steps to lift the shadow of deportation from these young people.
If you'd come to the U.S. when you were under 16, if you were either in high school or had a high school diploma, and if you had either no criminal record or like a teeny tiny misdemeanor,
then you could apply for the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA program. Basically, a permit that protects you from getting deported and allows you to work legally in the U.S. Juan got this protection, and so did nearly 800,000 others who applied. But now, that protection is gone.
I'm here today to announce that the program known as DACA that was effectuated under the Obama administration is being rescinded.
DACA was designed to protect a generation of young undocumented immigrants known as Dreamers, named after a bill called the DREAM Act, which had been floating around Congress for more than a decade, and with bipartisan support. The bill would have given unauthorized immigrants who grew up in the U.S. a way to gain legal status and eventually apply for citizenship. And even though it fell short of 60 Senate votes in 2010, the idea was still popular with the American public.
when President Obama announced DACA, it was in the middle of the 2012 presidential campaign, but it didn't turn into a huge campaign issue because Republicans were really ambivalent about turning immigration into a wedge issue.
We need to help accommodate these kids who, through no fault of their own, find themselves in this legal limbo.
We cannot forever have children who were brought here by their parents when they were small children to live in the shadows.
But in 2014, Obama proposed making older immigrants eligible for DACA and creating similar protections against deportation for undocumented parents with children who were U.S. citizens.
And a lot of Republicans said, whoa, that's too far.
These new actions would have protected about 4.5 million people, nearly half the estimated undocumented population. A group of 26 states sued the Obama administration over the expansion, and they won. A federal judge stopped the DACA expansions from going into effect, hinting that they were probably unconstitutional.
People had started thinking back to, well, if those bigger programs were unconstitutional, what does that say about this DACA program that's already in place?
Then came Donald Trump. When Trump won, DACA's fate seemed sealed. But even though he revoked lots of Obama's other executive orders on immigration, nearly 8 months into his term, he still hadn't ended DACA.
A lot of the immigration hawks began to go, wait, we were promised that you were going to get rid of this amnesty that exists right now. What the heck happened?
So a bunch of states threatened to sue the government over DACA again if Trump didn't get rid of it, which brings us to early September 2017.
It is my duty to ensure that the laws of the United States are enforced and that the constitutional order is upheld.
Well, unless they've been stated.
All right, so let me make a few points here. First, in 2012, when President Obama announced his executive order on DACA, it had some significant level of bipartisan support and was widely popular with the public, according to public opinion polls. It continues to be popular. The footage from the clip of Senators Marco Rubio and John McCain sympathizing with Dreamers is telling here. Back then, the Republican Party was unified mostly around the idea of not having this discussion to avoid an broader internal fight over all immigration policy. Now, second, President Obama helped to energize a base within the Republican Party against programs like DACA, when he tried to expand DACA with another executive order in 2014. This was called the Deferred Action for Parental Accountability, or DAPA, that would have extended to DACA-type protections to undocumented immigrants who were parents of American citizens or permanent residents, usually because they had children after they arrived in the United States. Now, this program would have extended temporary protection against deportation for 3 years and provide a work permit to nearly 5 million undocumented immigrants. This move was seen by many Republicans as an abuse of executive power, and eventually was blocked in the courts in a lawsuit by state governments led by Texas. Now, third, Donald Trump brought the issue of illegal immigration back to the forefront during the 2016 presidential campaign, in which he rallied strong support to build a wall to stop illegal immigration from Mexico and Latin America, and also to end programs like DAPA and DACA. Now, President Trump already canceled DAPA by executive order in June of 2017, ending the court challenge that held it in limbo by making the case moot. However, he wavered on ending DACA for children and sent mixed signals at times, saying he loved the Dreamers, and at other times signaling he would end the program. Ultimately, a group of 27 attorneys general, led again by the state's attorneys general, led again by the Attorney General of Texas, forced Trump's hand by threatening to bring a lawsuit to end the Deferred Act for Children, or DACA. Now, due largely to that pressure, plus lobbying from other immigration hawks, including his own Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, President Trump rescinded the DACA by executive order, but delayed execution of the order for 6 months to allow time for Congress to save the program. Now, the challenge, though, with that is that the same day that his Attorney General stopped the program, late at night, Trump sent a tweet saying he would revisit the program if Congress failed to do anything in 6 months, which potentially opened up the possibility that even if Congress fails to act, he will re-implement DACA by executive order at 6 months. There's no way of knowing.
Yeah.
But it added another layer of uncertainty that's hanging over.
And it's an interesting, this is an interesting dilemma for Donald Trump, for the Republican Party. When he rescinded DACA, he ended the program, in part as a concession to immigration hawks who helped get him elected, right? I mean, that was a key part of his constituency. But now he is, and this was just a tough decision for him, but now he is angering those same hawks by wavering when he ended it. And according to, one that I saw, heard on NPR, was he's negotiating with himself. I mean, there's not pressure for him to be saying these things. He's having second thoughts, and that's going to threaten his own base. And so one of the things that
Can I say one more thing on this? It wasn't a mistake in terms of who he sent out there to announce the end of the program. Jeff Sessions is not his favorite cabinet member right now. Right. There's a huge split between those two. The only reason Jeff Sessions didn't get fired over the summer is because Republican leadership in Congress said you can't fire him, or we're not gonna support you anymore. And so he sent Sessions out there in part because he doesn't like Sessions and
take the heat. Plus, Sessions happy to do it because he's a true believer in ending the program. And so let's end with just a few minutes about what happens next. Now, the first thing is this has a direct effect, especially on the state of Texas here and on cities like Austin, because of the concentration of Dreamers here that would be affected. And so the state of Texas has the second highest number of Dreamers, and it only behind California and way ahead of any other state by the hundreds of thousands of individuals. Plus, I would say, and I don't know the specific numbers here, but as a portion of the population, it probably has the highest. I don't know how much higher the population in California is over Texas, but it's an issue for the state of Texas. Now, the last thing that I want to just lay out there is the potential for a deal. And there's been a lot of talk about Trump's deal with the Democratic leadership on the extension of the debt ceiling that had happened in this past week. And they led many to speculate that he could perhaps strike a deal with the Democrats on DACA. And so there's been a lot of talk about his budding friendship with Chuck and Nancy, Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi, a leading Democrat in Congress, even recommended to Donald Trump to send out a tweet to reassure the DACA individuals that they wouldn't be in threat of deportation over the 6-month period that it's not being enforced, and he obliged quite quickly. And so there is some potential here. People think that the Democrats could be part of a bipartisan deal here. But I'm pretty skeptical about this, and the reason is that there has been bipartisan support for a law like this for decades, really, 16 years. But it's very difficult to actually get through because there are different emphases here. The Republicans still control both chambers of the Congress, and any bipartisan bill could not even potentially make it to the floor on the House of Representatives if Speaker Paul Ryan follows tradition of the Republican Party not to put to a floor vote any piece of legislation that doesn't have a majority support from Republicans. And so they have to bring the Republicans in on this in order to make it through the Congress. And this sort of deal where there is a deal, perhaps, but that deal would have to be something along the lines that the Democrats would get a Dreamer bill. They would prefer a bill just about the Dreamers that solves this immediate problem. But what the Republican Party is going to want to do is to push and combine that with some other concessions about more border security as part of a compromise deal. And that's where the details will get sort of messy, because already the Democratic Party is saying, sure, we could talk about this, but we're not going to do anything that builds a wall or any real border security in that way. We're not going to touch sanctuary cities. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. And so it's hard to see where they come together on that sort of compromise deal that would be necessary.
At its heart, and I'm going to agree with Rob's skepticism here over getting a deal done. At its heart, there is a fundamental split or cleavage within the Republican Party over immigration.
Right.
And part of that, it's a function of the changing platform of the Republican Party in the last 15 or 20 years. Traditional free marketeers are supportive of open immigration. President Bush tried to get a comprehensive immigration reform done back in 2006 and 2007, and by then the Republican Party had already reoriented itself to being much more critical of immigration. And so, and what Rob mentioned, which the real hurdle is, this is the Hastert rule in the House, which is no Republican leader wants to bring up a bill that doesn't have a full, or at least a majority of Republicans in support of him, because then that could make the leader vulnerable to a takeover by an opponent within the Republican caucus that wants to throw Ryan out and take a hard line on immigration. And so until this fight is resolved within the Republican Party, it's going to be very difficult to get a resolution among all three branches of government.
And this is what's fascinating about this whole thing, and I know we only have a few minutes, but the poll results, right? We took a poll of you guys. 78% of you, and this isn't too far out of line from national polls, probably a little higher.
A little higher.
But not that much. 78% said Congress should strike a deal to allow Dreamers to stay in the country. That's overwhelming support. 14% said they shouldn't. 8% said they don't know. But there's still a lot of hurdles, even when you have that kind of support. Now, there's going to be a lot of costs not to get this done, but when you had, and this is where Pat's point here about the tweet, I'll just revisit it. It kind of undermines the pressure to work out a deal on Congress, because, you know, if he's just going to fix it, then, you know, why take the hard votes and make the hard compromises in Congress when we could just get the status quo? And this is one point I want to say. Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House, Republican, asked Donald Trump to leave DACA in place. He says, if you want Congress to fix this, let us fix it first. Don't repeal it. Yeah. And they should have learned that from healthcare. You know, you can't repeal and replace because you might not get the replacement.
Yeah. So think Republican leaders in the House and the Senate want to get a deal done on this, want to get a deal on DACA. The challenge is with that tweet, it removed a source of leverage that they could hold over their members, saying, look, they could have, without that tweet, they could have said, look, this is something that the American public supports. We're looking at 75 to 80%. We're going to take a hit in 2018 unless we sign off on DACA. But now, and people are saying, well, I've got to worry about a primary challenge in my district. Now you want me to take a vote that could lead to a Tea Party challenge or a nationalist challenge. Why should I do that now if it looks like President Trump, if we don't do anything, if President Trump is just going to reinstate the executive order in 6 months? I got to worry about a primary challenge in March of 2018. I can't be for you on this vote, Speaker Ryan. And those are the calculations that are going on right now.